So in today's session, or at least in the first half of the session, I'm going to offer a brief account of the special issue that we've been working on for the Rights for Time network. And then I'll do an overview of the Jordan case study, which is the fifth of the case studies that originated at the beginning of the network analysis. And the four that previously we completed were described yesterday. And then I'll turn it over to Dr. Sajida and Dr. Yunis, who will each share their own work as two of the commission projects that we had in the second phase of the network. So let me share my screen. All right. All right, so the first item that I wanted to describe is the special issue, the Rights for Time special issue. And this is an idea that Kiki and I, Kirsten and I were really interested in developing last year when we met for one of the gatherings of the network. And the idea is to try to gather as many resources, as many geographies, as many methodologies and innovations and in conceptual frameworks for thinking about time in relationship to humanitarian protection across the network, and to have that all be in one journal special issue. And so the special issue that we're currently working on is with the Journal of International Humanitarian Protection. And we have 7 really interesting case studies that represent a variety of different parts of the network. And we're currently working with the editor in figuring out the final editorial strategies for getting the special issue through. And that has its own process that we've learned a lot about throughout the past few months. The title is Rights for Time, Rethinking the Temporal Dimensions of Humanitarian Protection. And it's a really interesting opportunity to think rigorously and academically and collaboratively about new temporal frameworks for humanitarian protection, something that we are increasingly in need of, given the layered and complex trauma and harm that we experience, especially now in places like Palestine, places like Sudan, and places like Congo. So this issue is really catered towards these timely issues, but we're also really interested in the longer durée. We're really interested in thinking beyond the present moment. And that's been the spirit of the network. And so as we finalize the special issue, we'll keep you all posted with where it's going. Hopefully we'll be able to have it as an open access issue, and then to share it with you all, and then with the larger network of Rights for Time. So that's for the special issue. And I'd welcome any thoughts or questions who is interested in learning more about the special issue. So the second item for today is the Jordan case study. So as I mentioned, Jordan was one of the first 5 case studies that were kind of the bulwark of the network's genesis. And each of the case studies is really interesting and fascinating and has its own entry point for thinking about this complex relationship between time and humanitarian protection. In Jordan, we decided to complement the more social scientific elements of the network with a humanistic or humanities-oriented approach. And so the theme of the Jordan case study was language. And what is the relationship between language and time? The title of our project, and also of a book that we've published about our work, is How Does the Refugee Enter Language? And the idea is to try to figure out how language plays a role over time in either restricting or liberating the self-identity of refugees. So how is it that terms evolve to either reflect an indigenous, nuanced perspective on the experience of forced displacement, on the one hand? On the other hand, how is it that modern bureaucratic and humanitarian organizations, especially as they operate in Western frameworks, often restrict conceptions of forced displacement according to modern Western concepts like the refugee, like the frameworks of international law that have often been the basis for humanitarian protection. So we decided to step back, to pause, to provincialize some of these Western frameworks, and to think about pre-modern conceptions and linguistic frameworks for forced displacement that might better or more accurately or more humanely allow us to think about for those who experience forced displacement. And so our concern was mostly in the Arab world, and specifically in the Levant. And so what we did is we began with literature. We tried to look for instances in literary accounts of the Palestinian refugee that point beyond the term refugee, that began to excavate alternative lexicons, alternative vocabularies for making sense of forced displacement. As we did so, we were also very sensitive to how a lot of this literature, which emerged after World War II, was very critical, or at the very least ambivalent towards the term refugee and the framework of international law that produced and propagated this term. And this is particularly the case because many of the international humanitarian organizations that are tasked with taking care of refugees at large, and Palestinians specifically, are often part of a larger colonial or neo-colonial structure that is more interested in offering material necessities rather than thinking structurally or politically or historically about the cause of these issues and kind of diagnosing those root causes. So literature is a really interesting, profound, and sometimes surprising avenue for thinking about excavating alternative literary, linguistic, even etymological discourses that might challenge modern conceptions of forced displacement and open up avenues for thinking about pre-modern forms. And so we focused a lot on the Palestinian revolutionary writer Ghassan Kanafani. It might seem odd to think about literature as a means of engaging with humanitarian protection. We often think of social science, public policy, and other more present, more quantitatively driven methodologies as being more adept at understanding this problem of humanitarian protection. But in fact, someone like Ghassan Kanafani, who was primarily a novelist and a man of letters, was so threatening to the Israeli settler colonial project that he was assassinated. And so that in itself, that biographical detail in itself, might give us room to pause and consider the power of literature, not merely as a means of kind of a reflective stance on what has taken place, but as offering something potentially revolutionary and potentially revolutionary enough for it to be the cause of Kanafani's assassination. So literature was our first entry point. Our second entry point, which was nicely kind of transitioned from literature to the pre-modern period, is the archive. So we went back to the archive. We looked at a lot of letters that a lot of these writers and intellectuals were writing. They were corresponding, and they were trying to figure out an alternative discourse, an alternative framework for making sense of the experience of being a refugee, the experience of experiencing forced displacement. And so we did a lot of work in the archive. We looked at university archives, we looked at literary archives, and we tried to go back as far as possible before World War II to think about how intellectuals prior to the establishment of many of the nation states, these post-colonial nation states that make up the Arab world, how they made sense of the experience of forced displacement. And from the archive, we went back to history. And so in thinking way back before World War II and actually thinking about the time before modernity, prior to the 17th century, we tried to look for terms in the history of the Arab Islamic world that tried to make sense of forced displacement according to theological, historical, political frameworks that predated the modern nation state. And so here's a list of 7 terms, 7 alternatives to the concept of the refugee, or in Arabic, laji. So دخيل, mustajir, khuruj, jiwar, hijra, isti'man, lujuu. These are all terms that we tried to figure out in terms of their practice and their conceptual framework, starting from before the advent of Islam, so going all the way back to the kind of pre-Islamic Arabian context, through the advent of Islam, through the theological inflections that the Quran mandated of prior pre-Islamic concepts, all the way through the Caliphate. And so we tried to take these terms and put them in conversation with our prior 2 approaches in the archive and literature to come up with a list of terms. Now, what is it that we want to do with these terms now that we've developed them over time, now that we've taken this long temporal perspective on the concept of the refugee and tried to destabilize it in its modern form and open up alternatives? We decided to gauge the resonance or effect of these terms on refugees or so-called refugees in the contemporary city, in the contemporary Jordanian city. So we focused on Amman, the capital. And so I'll return to this in a moment. So in the 5th part of our project, we looked at interviews. So we did a little bit of fieldwork. And what we did is we went to refugee communities, so refugee camps, but we also went to people who have been living in Amman for decades, who were themselves forcibly displaced either in after World War II or in 1967. And what we tried to do in these interviews was gauge the resonance of terms other than refugee in the historical and cultural imagination of these people who've experienced forced displacement either historically, so as second or third generation immigrants, or as refugees living in camps. And those interviews were really the crux of the project, and they brought all our different tools together to try to give us a better sense of the way in which certain terms that may have existed as proper conceptual frameworks and had correspondent practices before modernity, they still exist in the consciousness of people today. But often that existence is threatened or diluted or elided by the strength and power and hegemony of this global discourse of humanitarian protection, of refugee rights, and so on and so forth. And so in our project at large, and specifically through the interviews, we tried to reveal that tension between the inherited means of coping with crisis that are often linguistic, conceptual, theological in nature, and then the hegemony of the modern bureaucratic discourse of the nation state and of the Western international order. And so there's many more insights that are more specific to specific terms that cater to a more nuanced understanding of how we might develop public policy, how we might develop programs that cater to these inherited means of coping with crisis. And finally, that takes us back to the role of language. And language is so central to the history of the Arab Islamic world. And so there's a unique sensitivity for the ways in which shifting linguistic framework for making sense of something like forced displacement can actually open up all sorts of possibilities for building community, for grounding the experience of exile or forced displacement in a larger, more coherent and humane theological foundation. And so that has been the crux of our work in the Jordan case study, thinking about different methodologies in the humanities, from literary analysis to the archive, to history, to language, and finally to a little bit of fieldwork, to think about how language plays a role over time in mediating, liberating, or otherwise restricting our conceptions of humanitarian protection. The project also involved a lot of really interesting projects that engaged with the public. So we had public lectures about our research, we had articles, we created and presented artworks that tried to speak to the experience of being a refugee, but without the language to make sense of the experience through visual and sculptural form. So this is one of the sculptures we created. We also hosted a seminar through a grant from a partner network, the Education, Justice and Memory Network, EdJam, based at the University of Bristol. And through that grant, we developed a curriculum and a set of pedagogical tools for teaching basically what I've just described, this relationship between language and humanitarian protection. And finally, as I mentioned, we wrote a book. We wrote a book in Arabic so that it may be more accessible to those who we worked with and developed this framework with about how does the refugee enter language. So I'll leave it there. This is a close-up of one of the sculptures that we developed, I'll take it back to our current focus for the rest of the hour and a half that we have. So in the next hour or so, we'll hear from Dr. Sajida, and afterwards we'll hear from Dr. Eunice. And so I'll give it back to you, Anela.
That's great. Thank you very much, Abdullah. We have a few minutes that we can take a few questions before we continue. Any questions for Abdullah? Abdullah, we would like to know, how do we read the book?
Yes. So we have a PDF copy of the book, and we're in the process of getting an ISBN number in Jordan so that it can be published and made more readily available. But I would be very happy to circulate the PDF that we've created of the book up until we receive the ISBN number. And in fact, I mean, the beauty of this network is that even as we were writing the book, we received a request from Dr. Tamaris Fakhouri, because she was developing similar arguments in Lebanon. And so she requested a copy of the book before it was published, and we made it available to her. And so there's all sorts of interesting ways in which the network was able to allow us to share resources and to cultivate synergies across borders, even when the work wasn't fully ready. So I'd be very happy to share the PDF with the network, even prior to its publication.
That's great. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we will hear from Dr. Saglida Hassan and her team as they explore community awareness on impact and prevention of intergenerational trauma in their research project, Youth Time Against Trauma. Saglida, over to you.
So I hope you can hear me. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, and see the presentation. So I'll begin by first thanking you for the opportunity. And with me today is Professor Panos, also part of our team, and my colleague Zenat. So I'll be sharing some insight into our project, and then hopefully we'll hear something from Professor Panos as well as Zenat who would like to contribute. So I'll begin by giving an overview of our project, which what I'm going to use is the term WOW. And that's what we call the project here locally, which was Wounds of Wisdom. We were interested in intergenerational transference of trauma from resilience. And there's a lot of research on intergenerational trauma, which is transferred, but there's very few in terms of literature in Pakistan, particularly looking into evidence for intergenerational resilience. And this is what we were interested in. So the project in Karachi looked at two specific areas. We targeted two communities, and when we were looking at intergenerational trauma, what we defined is two different sort of communities. One was a community which suffered or experienced migration. So there's a history of migration there, migrated mostly from villages, communities, moved to Karachi mostly for political reasons or marginalized communities, or it was basically because they probably needed better resources there. Whereas the other community that we worked with was in Liari, and that community was targeted mainly because of their ethnic minority status. And those two communities are the ones that we worked with. We also worked on empowerment of youth educators. So we had a whole team of 14 youth educators who were part of the project. So what I will do is I will explain the project, and then perhaps we can look into the details of it. So the project WOW had 14 peer youth educators. We had 10 families, 5 from each location. They were the main advisors. They were the base of the entire project. We worked with them to be able to understand. The families helped us understand the definition, the depth of intergenerational trauma they experienced. What we aim to do is get insight from these families, insight from the experiences that they had, and use that to understand the resilience. And then use that knowledge to be able to help other communities learn from their experiences and then develop something for themselves, like a self-care plan for future community members or future generations to come. So there was a lot going on. And we began the project by first training the peer educators. So we had 12 training sessions for the peer educators to learn. These peer educators were selected from backgrounds. Some of them were young psychology students, others had no psychology background. But the idea was to take the energy from the youths, the kind of understanding that they have, the insights, and train them to be able to go out and relate to the communities and spread the message of positive mental health, right? We use participatory methods, and So we began the project, and I thank Professor Panos, who was there to launch the project, as well as conduct the initial training for the peer educators. We did some online sessions, and then we did a proper training, which was 3 months. Once they were trained, the peer educators then conducted these sessions with the families. And the aim of these 3 peer educator sessions with the families was to get an understanding of the kind of experiences the family had experienced in terms of trauma. So the first session that we had with the family was an understanding of the sort of intergenerational experiences and challenges that the families had faced over time. So what we did is, again, conducted by the peer educators, but the participatory method used expressive art, and we asked the families, and they were sitting as intergenerations. So it was the grandmother, the mother, and then the youths or the young children were there. And they were sitting as a team, and the major work that they had to do was to start by creating or drawing a tree, and the tree represented their family. So the roots was the grandparents, and then the stem or the branches was the current generation, and then the leaves and the trees and the flowers was the youths or the young generation. And we talked about the strength and the challenges that each one of them faced over time. And what we came across was something like that. So the way I'll look into the strengths first very briefly. And although it was a cross generation, but they talked about the kind of collectiveness and strong family bonds and very strong family networks and neighborhoods. You could rely on your neighbor, you could trust your neighbor more. And there was a lot of family support, there was bonding, right? And if you look today, the kind of challenges that they faced, they were talking about that they probably had more resources, had some sort of financial stability also, but a lot of them talked about how disconnected they've become within their own family or even within the network. So this is how we began by talking. We didn't jump into trauma, but just to get a feel of what generally they feel about generation and across generation differences. This was the first session. And that's the kind of responses we got from the families. Okay, so the next time we met the families, we talked more now in depth. Now we asked them a simple question in Urdu. We say Ghar Ghar Ki Kahani. So we asked them to now open up and start sharing more depth stories about their own family lives. And we began by asking them again to sit as a family. And we did a mindfulness activity, imagining a house and how they would structure the house, how would they like to, color it, roof it, paint it, the kind of rooms they want to imagine, and then the structure outside the house also, right? And each representing a particular theme. What we were trying to understand, the house here represents the kind of personal stories, the challenges within their own family that they faced, whether it was a trauma related to domestic violence, whether it was because of a particular ethnic minority that was targeted, a faith that was targeted, how they felt about it. Those are the kind of things that they drew, painted, or draw and presented in the house. The area outside represented their resilience. Right? What helped these families, what helped across the generation to kind of cope with whatever they were facing, right? And that was the insight we were gaining from the families. That's some of the images. Okay. It was here at this point that we introduced to the families as well as the peer educators the concept of wow and how we symbolized it with a butterfly and the process of transformation of a butterfly. So we ended this kind of emotional talk that we had with families about their own trauma with butterfly origami art. Okay, so on the basis of all the information collected from these workshops with the families as well as the peer educators, we conducted some focus group interviews. We then started the second phase of our project where we changed the name to WOW Tips. So on the basis of information collected, we now called it trauma-informed prevention and self-care, because what we were trying to do is to get the information that we collected from the family as well as the peer educator, take that information, design community-based workshops that the peer educators conducted, and go into the community and take a self-care plan, a preventive self-care plan, right? So I'm not going to share all because we managed to conduct 11 workshops with the peer educators, 6 in Lines area and 5 in Liari. Beautiful response. So the workshops were divided into workshops specifically for mothers, for grandmothers, and then youths. So in each area. So I won't go through each one of them, but quickly, very quickly, all of them were participatory. All of them were very hands-on with a very clear message of what you want to teach them in terms of understanding emotional challenges, emotional trauma, as well as managing themselves, and then how you can help others around you. So this was a beautiful workshop that we did with mothers, where I used the concept of light and inner light, like a mother is a light, how she radiates positive energy, and how important it is for her to kind of support herself, take care of herself, so that she can take care of others. My personal favorite, I think I've talked about it a lot in all the interviews, is the workshop that we did for grandmothers. I think it was the first time that they felt somebody talked to them in such depth about themselves in terms of self-care. And, just allowing them that opportunity to feel important was something which I think I'm going to hold beautiful memories for that forever. We also did sessions both for school teachers as well as religious scholars or religious teachers for madrasas, all of them teaching them the importance of taking care of their own emotional health, their own self-care, and then impacting positively to their children. Okay. Youths definitely enjoyed with the youths. I'm not going to talk about all. I'll talk a bit about this. So when we were talking with young people, and when we're talking with young people, so particularly with boys, a lot of them were not into art, and they're like, oh, I don't want to draw, I don't want to paint. So we thought, okay, we'll need something else for boys, and we used IE facial expressions, just for them to first understand and read emotions and understand, and then use superhero themes for them to be able to connect and, use those skills. Again, what power or what superpowers would you like to have to help yourself? And if there are people around you who need care. So yeah, mothers, I think this is also a beautiful memory because we went to this preparing for about 30 mothers. But when we got there, we found a room full of 100 moms because they found out there's a free workshop happening and everybody wanted to attend. And we told the school, it's all right, we'll accommodate. So we had to make some adjustments. But basically, because this is an area which was very, very I don't know, very, very poor, basically, the people. So they didn't have access to a lot of things. So when we were doing self-care, one of our peer educators is a beauty therapist, and she suggested, why don't we use self-care by teaching them, daily food products or something that they can use, even if it is banana peels, to rub and take care of their skin. It's about feeling good. When you feel good, you are able to, use that positive energy in a positive way. So I think that worked well. This was one of my special workshops also. Again, I've talked about it. We've written an article on it. This is an organization here in Karachi where they work with single moms. So they could either be divorced or abandoned or rejected or whatever. In any case, they live in this shelter home, which is Hunargar. Hunargar is translated as a space which is as a talent house, basically. So it's not just a house which is giving a safety space, but also using that to help to identify their resources and their talent and then developing it. So when we went there, by the time we interacted with these moms, they had come through a long journey, and we didn't want to talk about trauma a lot. So we talked in the journey of resilience, we talked about the concept of a crown, helping them to create a resilience crown to help them celebrate their achievements and what they had done. And this is what we're trying to do. So we had flowers, and they wrote about their achievements and then decorated it as a clown. And the hearts had pebbles, which were representing stories that they had to tell the next generation in terms of their strength and resilience, the lessons they had learned. All right. So this was like a rough overview, but then again, what do we learn from all these 11 workshops? Summarizing these, we conducted focus group interviews after each workshop with the peer educators as well as the participants, selected participants. And I think summarizing the findings, basically what we tried to communicate is that intergenerational learning, and obviously there is trauma, but there is a lot of resilience, there's a lot of strength, there is a lot of wisdom that can be transferred to the next generation, right? In terms of self-care, how important it is to start early teaching of emotional literacy, self-care plans, coping strategies. Now, this may sound very, very basic to some people, but I think it's extremely important in places and cultures like ours, where we don't openly talk about feelings and emotions and expression of emotions. So I remember, I think yesterday in one of the presentations, there was a photograph where you were talking about how important it is to show love if you love someone. And it's so basic, but in some cultures like ours, it's not something which is allowed openly. And I think talking about emotions, it has been a taboo topic, but starting and opening and putting that seed in people's mind as early as possible is very, very important. So finally, with the last thoughts, I think putting it all in terms of a resilience model, obviously we learned how basic basic needs is obviously the basic, right? You build on them, and then you work on family bonds and network and community bonding and support networks. And then you move on to more positive coping strategies, faith healing, believe in Allah, whatever it was. It was very important, but so was learning to regulate your emotions as well as problem-solving strategies. And once you have that, you can finally aim towards the higher self, which is more empowerment and teaching them skills, which they can transfer to the next generation. And I think what we learned from the project is how all of this is achievable, even within 9 months of the project. So leaving with the final thoughts of definitely give yourself time. And this is something we learned from the peer educators, we learned from the families. Okay, I think I'm done with my presentation. I don't know if anybody has any questions or thoughts. I hope I was in time, Manila.
You were perfect.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Sajida. Any questions for Sajida? Okay, if anyone can think of anything, you can always put them in the chat. Okay, thank you so much. Right, and then now we are going to hear from Dr. Eunice Apel and her team as they give us a lovely presentation on their project aiming to increase public knowledge and understanding of the challenges faced by children born of war. Eunice, over to you.
Hello.
Oh, you've muted yourself, Eunice.
Hello.
Yep, good to go.
Oh, yes. Hello. Hi, everyone. Sorry about the technology. I'm going to do most of the talking anyway, directly. I'm Eunice Otukwa. I'm happy to be here, and I'm accompanied by a team of about 4 of the project members. We have 3. We have our clinical psychologist, Peace Otukwa Toneva, and then we have 3 children born of war. You're welcome, and we're going to be splitting this into 2. I'll do a bit of the talking, giving a background to our project, and a little bit of a sneak peek actually into some of the findings, and then I'll hand over to the 3 children born of war to take us through their documentary. And so I hope I can be heard because I'm in a difficult location that has very poor network. I'll do my best if we fail. Our project is Theme in Participatory Action Learning, and we've abbreviated it as FPAL. It's about the integration of children born of war, and it focuses on Northern Uganda. In January 2023, I worked with a team of children born of war. We also had a scholar, a clinical psychologist, and a film producer from Vado Film, based in London, on a research impact study on the integration of born of war in Northern Uganda. Earlier, the film producer had worked with all of us to co-produce an award-winning documentary film with 15 children born of war who had volunteered from Northern Uganda. And the film, The Wound is Where the Light Enters, is a piece that speaks to their experiences of stigma, of rejection, and of discrimination. But important to note is that the born of war are in their thousands, not only in Uganda, but in all countries where conflict-related sexual violence thrive. And their everyday experiences continue to be shaped by their provenance, which is sorry, I hope I can be heard. Their everyday experiences continue to be shaped by their provenance, which is perceived as contradicting norms and practices of kinship, marriage, childbirth, and motherhood, especially in patrilineal contexts. And this largely explains the stigma, the discrimination, and rejection born of war face in many communities. The aim of our project was to continue to bridge research and practice to directly benefit the group we have studied for some time, that is the Born of War. It enables the Born of War to take ownership of their stories and share their experiences. I would like to quickly wrap up the key issues around methodology. This time around, through the project, we would apply our documentary film, The Wound is Where the Light Enters, as a research impact tool to moderate a participatory action learning process that would be led by Born of War in rural communities that have Born of War struggling to integrate. And having this documentary saved us a lot of valuable time because it meant we would not start from scratch. If we didn't have it, we would have to have probably more than a year trying to put together the documentary by children born of war in the first place, so that we would have in place a tool that would use then to do what we managed to do in 3 phases. So through this impacts research study, we therefore set about exploring the effectiveness of using a documentary co-created by Born of War. And we used it to participatorily engage with communities. We like to look at it as their own way of fighting back, to dialogue with gatekeepers of what we refer to as lineage time, with all its complexities, as explored in one of our 2 articles yet to be published. Our project took 3 phases. First, we did a baseline, and then we had a screening in 4 communities deep in rural northern Uganda, undertaken and driven by at least 8 children born of war. We equipped the volunteers with necessary facilitation skills to prep them to embark on the sprint, reflect, discuss, take action participatory model that the FPAL project had adopted to engage with the target audiences in 3 districts of northern Uganda. Born of War were trained in videography, were able to take footages, to put together and edit a 10-minute documentary video on the screening of that documentary film to advocate for integration of Born of War. And then again, we did a post-screening survey, which whose findings are contained in an article that's, as I said earlier, yet to be published. We'll conclude this with a screening of the documentary of this documentary video that was developed by Born of War. But before we do that, allow me to briefly set the context for you. The study, the 3 phases, that is the survey, preliminary survey, and then the screening in the 3 communities, in the 3 districts, and the post-screening survey help us to gain deeper understanding of how the Born of War experience their unique stigma and rejection, which appears to be systemic and actually hardwired into the very meaning of local lineages in northern Uganda. We already knew that many of the societies we worked with, like those in northern Uganda, are typically patrilineal, with their kinship systems locating individuals into a relational context that continually shape their experiences. But overall, Born of Wars do struggle and most often fail to integrate in their maternal communities. Their struggles are also often linked to the difficulties their mothers face in reintegrating, themselves often suffering different forms of stigma and discrimination and of course, rejection. Our findings, importantly, in the heart of it, suggest that not knowing a biological father, or at least his lineage, distorted the sense of generational time for Born of War and exposed them to a lack of avenues for claims and counterclaims associated with the lineages. And this is primarily because lineages rely on birth of married women's offspring to code and mark time. When no birth takes place, according to the normative rules, there most likely will be no production of time. In other words, the birth of Born of War were not automatically recognized and coded as a marker of time in northern Uganda by any of the lineages associated with their parents. The local lineages, as we said earlier, are patriarchal and therefore apply a generational code, a default generational code, which is the reference. They apply it as a reference frame for defining and redefining an offspring. And this is where we got into trouble as children born of war. This is where we have challenges, because when they do not meet the requirements of the jural rules of these local lineage groups, as indeed these children born of war are perceived, then they become an anomaly. They cannot be accepted to code and mark the lineage time for all of the lineages that their mothers and their fathers associate with. And this coding, unfortunately or fortunately, is buttressed with the rights to claims and counterclaims, the right to land, the right to this, the right to that. So in the case of our 48 study participants, well, we had 8 children born of war volunteering to take the message down to communities, to interact with communities after doing 48 interviews, focus group discussions with 48 study participants who themselves are children born of war and contacted in northern Uganda. These 48 study participants were not only portrayed as lost in terms of generational time, but as situated within generational time codes that are broken or weakened, and within the opportunities to claims and counterclaims associated with lineages, like we said earlier, the everyday actions which would further produce and mark time in their case or in their cases are lost, and never coded and never recognized. These have, among other things, given rise to stigmatizing labels. We've actually had the opportunity during this study to look at stigmatizing levels a little differently, to contextualize it within the lineages that we are engaging with. And we look at them now a little differently. We look at them as metaphors that typify a brokenness of the child's lineage. When they refer to you as this and that, they're actually using metaphors to say that this child, to refer to the strangeness of the child and a distancing of the child from the prevailing lineage and resources associated with their mothers or with the lineages that they live in. So these metaphors refer to a time gap as a result of coding in lineage time. And we have these findings coming out in a peer-reviewed paper. We also have a methodology paper, like I said earlier, which we hope to have published. I would like to invite Peter, Mercy, and Godby, the three of the children born of war, to take part in this, who took part in the screening, reflecting, discussing, and acting model of our FPAL, and then went ahead to co-produce the documentary to speak to it and to screen it. And I would like to request Anela to share it with us on the screen. And as she's doing that, it's important to note that children born of war understand that the production of time is not static. Throughout the process, when they were doing the production, the screening out in the communities, and then the putting together of their production, they understood that production of time is not static, it's static in their case, and that it evolves. And so they have redeployed that documentary within that context to cause a dialogue in how time is produced and possibly modify that by pushing back and fighting back as well. And that explains the use of their FPAL video. They like saying that they're taking back control to re-narrate the story of their birth on the prevailing local context. They're having a dialogue with the gatekeepers of time. So thank you very much. I would like to invite Godby, Mercy, and Peter to do the screening. I hope we still have the 10 minutes that we need. Thank you. I don't hear the noise, the sound. The sound is not there.
One second.
We want to achieve as a group of children born of war. we want to create
And everyone hear the sound out.
to the community there. If we can change their perspective, how they see things, what they think about children born of war. And then maybe if we can bring in, unite them, we bring them healings, because it is actually very hard to some people there.
No matter. I haven't tried committing suicide.
Today, 15 of us have come together for our 4-week workshop. People can just really just laugh at it.
If she's really the one who produced this film doesn't need to go only abroad. This film needs to be spread in our communities here, so that to create the healing, to sensitize, to make people be aware of what happened, of us. A lot of children like us, it wasn't easy to open up and talk about the story. That right now we are screening everywhere, and we are following up with it, because it is hurting. So there are a lot of children like me back there who need to pass through the same healing. So we thought of making this film to show to the community who we are, what we are capable of, what we want.
React with it.
A child that has never been produced in this world a child that has been produced in this world.
A child, you, okay.
A child.
I think.
That has never been.
Any mere sensation, make a phone, you can, and you're
You don't want to move to the phone one. Kill me, take a pair and only can a more take a word, come take a board, pony, around Palone, police stations, you're marketing.
The film was produced by 15 of us. Actually, it was children born of war, and the title to that film is "The Wound is Where the Light Enters." My role was to tell the community, to tell people outside there that I, as Yona, once I was a child born of war, and I was not able to talk about myself, but due to the support that they gave me, I was able now to stand on my own, and then like maybe also to give courage to other children outside there. Maybe when we, the children, gather together and then like maybe produce that by ourselves, and then maybe we show it like to the community, and actually we are kind of even supported, like psychologically we are like having therapists that were also like kind of giving us some support, and we went through training, which was like we were given skills, that is dance, music, and writing as well. I've come
Okay, so given the interest of time, we had to pause the lovely film here. But if you would like to learn more about the FPAL project and continue with the documentary, please use the link below.
Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you, Godby, Peter, and Mercy, and of course, Peace, for your time. I look forward to the interaction. Today, we have children born of war with us, and they might want to have questions, comments from everyone. If you do, yes, on their experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Eunice. Are there any questions for Eunice and her team before we go on a small break?
Maybe I just wanted to add something.
Sure, go ahead, Peter.
So in this film, like for us to get this tool and be able to manifest within our communities, it's we just want to do an initiative of I don't know the best word I can use. It's like we want to take it back to the roots of our culture, whereby we're able to communicate to our parents, to the community. We're able to communicate and transfer information to them in the best way they can understand. So in this means that even if that's why we want to put it in a situation where we're able to take the films and we screen it to them by ourselves. We're able to make the production and we're able to explore and disguise these feelings within the community. Because we assume that it is easier for us to integrate with them when we're using their very own language and they're seeing the same people, because we are the victims here of the children born of war. When we came back, actually me, I'm one of the victims. I was a child born in captivity. When we came back, we faced different challenges. There was rejection from our very family members, and some of us were forced to do extraordinary things that that were so inhuman. Many of our friends went on the streets because they were not accepted at their very homes. Many of us lacked the financial support, and above all, there was a lot of the emotional support that we needed. And emotional support is something that it's very, very important for someone, because when the community doesn't accept you, when they look at you like outcasts, it's really something that can torment someone. Even so, that's why when we go to this community and we show them that since the organization FAPAT, they empowered us, they supported us mentally, they supported us, our education. So since they did this and we are able to learn and be able to produce something like a film like this, so it's like the community is like a blessing. It's like here we are, the 15 of us, we're able to produce this. So, and we are not shy about our stories. We're willing to tell our stories to the world. And those of our friends, when maybe they are hiding, they don't feel confident, we come up and say that, no, here we are doing this all by ourselves, and you can also do it as well. So we need this empowerment to make it bigger and bigger, from 15 to 1,000, because there are hundreds of thousands of victims of children born of war out there who are hiding, who cannot tell out their stories, who cannot face up the community and talk. But once we put this tool by ourselves and we're able to establish these films by ourselves, the victims by ourselves, it is very easy for the community to integrate with us. It's very easy because they see us like, no, these are one of us. These are one of our children. It's high time that we start listening to our side of the story. Much as before we came back from the
Oh, I think we have lost Peter with internet connection.
Do we still have, thank you very much. Do we still have 1 minute for Nora to respond briefly to Nora? Nora has a question, a comment. Hello?
Yeah, we can.
Eunice,
Nora, go ahead. You can answer Nora's question.
Nora is asking that I found your explanation of the exclusion of these children, now adults, as hardwired into social systems. I would like to hear a little more, and also on the work that remains beyond acknowledgement to ensure these children a place in time. Thank you very much, Nora. I've done quite a lot of work on the case of children born of war, and I've gone deeper to explore beyond just the use of sexual violence as a weapon of war. In our case, in the case of Northern Uganda especially, I looked at tools, things such as marriage and others that the local community, that local societies use to create lineages, or to admit new members into lineages, because the lineage is the space where everything literally happens. It's where the jural laws are put in place, where to give identity to newborns. Resources, land, everything are actually accessed typically looking at it. And so the studies already show that some of the societies there, especially the ones that I've studied, looked at the LRA, the sexual violence, as a hijack of wombs, because the womb, briefly, is a means of giving identity, of lineage making. It's a tool for lineage making and other things associated with, like I said earlier. And so it's kind of complex. In this particular study, we are driving it a little deep in that, all right, when we have not looked at the aspect of time in this case, but lineage brings, it's like a meeting point for where marriage with its own, meanings that locals associate it with, provides the means again for the coding. Without the coding, there's no lineage, because lineages are made of members. And so the children in this case, and to get back to this, it's deeper than that, it's more complex than that, but the children are saying that, well, they are gatekeepers within these lineages, and we want a dialogue with them. Nothing is actually impossible for us to knock off, because we've seen by our birth there was a moderation. The system itself was not sensitive to the fact, had not been sensitized before we were born, before our category were born, that there were other people who could be admitted into the time coding aspect, into the time marking aspect of the Lango people, for example, of the Choli people, for example. But we are here and we want to be part of that. We want to be invited into that, and there are different ways of doing that. We're looking at stigma a little differently as metaphors of saying that we are locking you out, you're not members, and this and that. And it boils down to what we are talking about, is culture, or it's cast in stone? No. And that's what the children are saying. We want dialogue. We could go on and on, but I will probably refer you to some of my articles as well. Later on, I can share the links, and you look at it, how some of these arguments have been advanced up to date. So thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you so much, Eunice, and thank you, Peter, and the rest of your team. It was a lovely, lovely presentation. We're now going to take a very quick 5-minute break, and then we will be back to watch yet another film. So we'll be back at 1:40. Okay, thank you. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Just gonna give a couple more seconds to make sure everyone has returned. Okay, and now we will hear from the wonderful team from the Wanga Kandla Foundation. I'll be giving things over to Laura Stevens, who is going to introduce us to our new film screening. Laura, over to you.
Thank you ever so much, Anella. So apologies if you can hear the noise outside. Obviously, with the lovely weather, it appears everybody wants to cut their grass in my neighbourhood. So I'm very, very sorry if you can hear that in the background. So just a very, very brief disclaimer that the film that we're going to be seeing now will be discussing sexual and gender-based violence. So I'm sure you've all seen that as part of the programme, but just to give that disclaimer that if anybody would not like to hear about sexual and gender-based violence, please do feel free to leave now and to join for the next section. However, if not, thank you ever so much for staying with us and for hearing about our documentary. So the documentary that we're going to be seeing now is called Unbroken Voices and is in collaboration with the Wangu Kanja Foundation, as Anella has just mentioned. This powerful new documentary film gives voice to the experiences of sexual violence survivors in Kenya. It's created in collaboration with the Survivors of Sexual Violence in Kenya network, who were originated by the Wangu Kanja Foundation. The film portrays survivors' resilience while highlighting individual and systemic struggles that they face. It shows how community enables the journey from a victim to a survivor. The film is based on Rights for Time research that you will have heard about yesterday during our case study presentation of our Kenyan research. And it looks at our analysis of the legal, social, and public health realities endured by sexual violence survivors in Kenya and globally. This research aims to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal 5, which is gender equality, and Goal 16, justice and inclusion, by gathering better evidence to prevent these crimes and to protect survivors. So this film was a participatory film approach with the Wangu Kanja Foundation, researchers within the Rights for Time network and at the University of Birmingham, and producers and researchers at Kenyatta University. So the script itself was actually designed by the Wangu Kanja Foundation and their members, and that is what you're going to see now. So we've already screened this for stakeholders in Kenya, for community health volunteers, and to the Survivors Network themselves, and we've received their feedback. But without further ado, Anela, if you wouldn't mind, I think let's hand it over to the voices of the network themselves and see a bit of Unbroken Voices. Thank you.
As a survivor, I've gone through enough, but now I'm strong and I need to move on. So I think I'm resilient, and that's why I'm here today.
In life, everyone is on a journey to reach our aspirations, our dreams, our fulfillment, a journey to success, a journey to education, a journey to productivity, a journey to adventure. For some of us, this journey abruptly takes unexpected twists.
Broken bad, don't tell me why, just tell your story.
My name is Pauline Juma. I am a journalist by profession, but my passion is empowering young women and girls and children. I love storytelling, and I write a lot of poetry when I'm depressed.
I'm Jane Alfayo. I'm a mother of 3.
My name is Johnston Abwao. I am currently working as a finance officer for Rebirth of a Queen.
My name is Lorraine Onginjo. I'm a survivor of sexual and gender-based violence.
Naitwa Amelia Kenye, aka Mama County. Natoka Mukuru kwa Njenga.
My name is Victoria Tieno, a survivor of sexual violence.
My name is Wangu Kanja, founder and executive director of Wangu Kanja Foundation.
According to Kenya Demographic Health Survey of 2014, over 45% of women aged 15 years to 49 years have reported being physically and sexually abused in Kenya. Sadly, at least 41 people are raped every day in Kenya. While a small percentage of males have reported being raped, reports show that the biggest perpetrators of rape are men. Unfortunately, only 1 person out of 20 reports a rape case to the justice system in Kenya. With these worrying facts in mind, we follow the lives of these phenomenal survivors.
Back in 2009, I was raped. Tulikuwa tumeenda Dunda, stima ikapotea, tukaseek refuge wasichana wa 4. So kwenda kuseek refuge kwa police station, ama polisi ndio wakaturape. I was 14 years old, and I had a friend whose name was Sarah. Sarah told me to visit his friends. Up to now, CJ understand whether Sarah was in that story ama hakuwa, because sijai interact na yeye ever since that day.
One day my best friend told me, is it okay we go help my brother to wash his clothes? That is the day I was gang defiled by 4 men. So for me, I was being punished through defilement for going to school and for helping my friend.
I had this man who really abused me in the relationship. The only time yenye alikuwa anataka kuwa close na mimi ni saa zile anataka ku have sex na mimi. So most of the time alikuwa na use force.
As we come together to condemn the rising numbers of cases of sexual violence, there is need to verify the facts relating to sexual violence in Kenya, resulting from myths, deformation, and distortion of fact. This process will allow for proper dissemination of appropriate and correct information, including measures put in place to support survivors of sexual violence.
I spoke out 7 years later, when I was 23. But for 7 years, I was surviving. And the reason why I really don't like it, I don't have good terms with the word survivor, because I survived for 7 years.
It happened to me a very long time ago, that is 1991. But it was a rape case by somebody that I don't know because it was dark. But I only came to open up in 2016. And that is after engagement with different people, especially on activities that were led by one of the justice centers. So through that, I came to know Wangu Kanja Foundation.
I went through rape in 2002 through a carjacking incident, and from the challenges that I faced during that time, informed the establishment and setting up of Wangu Kanja Foundation to support other survivors who might be going through the same challenges that I went through.
Mimi sikuwa najua kitu kama survivors. Mimi Wangu Kanja walikuja wakatufunza about GBV. Ukiwa rape tunaenda OC, unaenda polisi, unakuja kwao. Kama uwezi enda OC kuja kwetu Ruben Center, tupeleke OC tufanye nini? Mimi sikuwa najuanga story na survivors ama nini ama victims. 294 nilituma message wakanipigia. Tuliregister alafu nikatuma message help wakanipigia. So wakaniambia tuko hapa Ruben Center, nikaenda. Huyo ndo the first person to open up.
So from there we went through the processes of healing, psychosocial support, but we couldn't go for the medical checkup because of the time that has expired.
Efforts towards sexual violence prevention and response have improved over the years thanks to different actors, both state and non-state.
Hiyo story ya part ya sexual violence sijai share in public. Community walikuwa wanajua huyo chali alikuwa ananipiga. Hadi hao walikuwa wananihurumia juu ya kupigwa. But hawako wanajua the inside. Walikuwa tu wanajua hiyo ya kupigwa juu. Obviously unajua ukipigwa utapiga nduru, utaitana hivyo. But hiyo ya sexual sikuwahi zungumza na mtu.
So with the help ya Tika, we did a body map. That was my healing process, by the way. We were told in each and every part of your body, just write any scar, any pain, any color that symbolizes the pain that you went through, any color that symbolizes your healing process. So through that body map, I can tell that's where I healed, because from that day I can stand in front of people and share my story.
Women, girls, boys, and children are not only the survivors of sexual violence. Some men are also survivors of sexual violence.
I wouldn't really remember the first time it happened, the exact year, but it's someone that I knew. It was a lady, but the worst case would happen in 2013. I met a friend, and I don't know, but it spiked my drink, and the next minute is I'm waking up in the same bed.
Your wings are broken, but are you willing to rise and tell your story?
Started making a lot of effort in 2017. I realized I was getting old. So there's no one who was going to stand with me because I hadn't shared my story with anyone. In fact, this could be maybe the third or fourth place I'm sharing my story.
It is hard to tell for your family what is happening because what you see, it is going on to other people. Because once nikianza kusema, there are some people, I always keep quiet with what I'm saying. Out and they never believe me, especially my family. Kitu kifanyika, they end up spreading my name everywhere there.
Come out of hiding. I want you to
Wanaume wanasuffer in silence. Wanaendago sodomy. But again, mapolisi ni wabaya. Mwanaume akienda kuriport anaambiwa, ai, kwani wewe ilianza aje?
Kwa African belief, tulilelewa tukijua wanaume ni watu wenye hawafai kuumia. Wanaume wako na ile uwezo ya kuishi vile wanataka, ile maisha. Yani wanaume ndio heads. So hawafai kuumia. Hata wakiumia hawafai kuongelelea kwa sababu wao wanaweza stahimili.
What if you don't believe men can be raped? Even if you go to the police station, they can say, when numbu atakataka, mwanaume gani huwezi pigana na mwanaume zako. They just abusing men in different language.
I want you to shine and tell your story.
I used to numb my pain using alcohol. So I used alcohol as a coping mechanism for 2.5 years. But then after that, I sought the right rehabilitation mechanisms to help me deal with the issue a day at a time.
At 16, that is when I started writing poetry because that was the only way I could take my pain away. I wrote poetry in books and hid them under the bed because, oh my God, if anyone could ever find out those books, I think I will be jailed for life. I killed a lot of people in poetry.
Nupenda ball. Saa zingine kama ni light, si kama ile deep, naenda tu kucheza ball na jipia time out.
How I cope, the one that I can afford. I love music. Funnily, I love bongo music. So I dance a lot with the girls and I work with youths. So most of the time we'll have dancing classes.
Challenges dealing with people who face sexual and gender-based violence ni a number. 1, kwanza cases za watoto. Wazazi kukuwa compromised na perpetrator.
More children are being abused now than before. And we don't have the best referral mechanism.
Kumbe madhe walienda na familia za kina kijana wakaongea kasema, let me not share it with anyone else because batafungwa ama tumalize. Little did they know that I was pregnant.
Kama the other day nili rescue kasichana kenye karidifailiwa na kakawekwa mimba. So huo mtoto unapata juu ana mahali pa kuenda na amedifailiwa na mtu ako karibu sana na familia. I link them up to shelters.
Offer support to survivors by making sure that they're able to access comprehensive care and support.
Currently, we don't have a safe house that is the government driven that accommodates the survivors. So we rely on private safe houses.
Kama Maisha Girl Safe House whereby wanapata nini, wanaweza kukaa pale for some time wakitafutiwa vile wanaweza saidika.
Kama mimi nikirescue mtoto sifai kulala naye kwa nyumba yangu. The law says that anything is happen na mimi nifungwe. Ukipeleka mtu police station, hawana mattress, hawana diapers, hawana nini. Mimi hata ushangaa mtoto analala wapi hapo. Na the only safe house tuko nayo huko Mukuru ni Shofco. Na Shofco saa zingine yuja. Juu pia wao wanachukua wamama wamepigwa. Wanachukua wote. Gender based violence na sexual pia wanachukua wote. So unapata kitambo wa release maybe mtu ndio achukue huyo mtu atakuwa amekaa police station 2 days na asijui vile anaishi hapo. Unashika.
let's hold the perpetrator accountable and make sure that the survivors is able to access justice in a timely manner.
Cases zetu zina take long. Mtu alidifailiwa akiwa sijui 13 years, anafika akiwa anapata ID kama kesi yake inaendelea, surely.
The only way we are able to do that is working with that person so that we help them claim their dignity back.
Juzi vile kumebomolewa, hakuna maji. Unapata mtu unalala bila maji una, water vendors wanataka ku have sex na wewe. When ni survivor, mtu yeye anakulilia, what will you do? Wamama wengi there's cases of sex for water.
Uko Mkuru, there is a group ilikuwa imekam. You sell yourself for 20 shillings so that you can get something to give your child. One of my friend pia, mamake alikuwa na to exploit kwa sex work cause sasa hata hakuna mali unapata usaidizi. You believe that 20 shillings inaweza kubaia sabuni.
As we come together to condemn the rising numbers of cases of sexual violence, there's need to verify the facts relating to sexual violence in Kenya, resulting from myths, deformation, and distortion of facts.
Alafu cases za gender based violence, intimate partner violence, sasa hiyo ndio sasa hata mapolisi watakani kusikia.
Ilifika time hadi alikuwa anataka kulala na mimi nyuma. So hii ikakuwa ni shida kubwa sana na ikakuwa hiyo violence imezidi na alikuwa amezoea sana kuni force kwa rape, kwa sex. So mostly alikuwa anani rape nikiwa tu kwa hiyo relationship.
I'm also a paralegal, GBV paralegal attached to COVAL as much as I volunteer with Wangu Kanja. Tulitrainiwa wakaona cases za intimate partners ziendi mbele kwa nini.
Mimi ni mara mingi sana nilijaribu kutolewa but nilikuwa naona hawa watu wenye wanataka kunitoa hata hawanipendi. Kwa nini hawataki nikuwe na huyu?
We all, as paralegal we link the victims with the justice. Sisi ma lawyers. So unamtake through the referral pathways. Enda OC andikiwa nini, enda police station chukua obini nini kesho. Mwanaume anakuja anashikwa jioni kesho. Unasikia mimi nimeamua nimtoe, nilikuwa nataka tu afunzwe adabu.
So vitu mingi sana zinakuzuia wewe kutoka katika ile relationship. So unajipata tu uko pale. Unless upate mtu mwenye anakupenda ama anakuunderstand ama ashawaipitia kitu kama hiyo, ndio anaweza kukufungua macho, akuonyeshe yenyewe hapa mali huko unaumia.
The economic burden that sexual violence brings to communities and the world in general is alarming. Survivors of sexual violence sometimes have to pay for services out of their own pocket, while on the other hand, the public pays through provision of services to them and their significant others. Businesses lose money through employee absences and sexual harassment suits. The cost for offenders' imprisonment, probation, treatment and other offender services adds to the total cost of sexual violence.
Finances. No one cares about survivors in this country, and I think I hate it. I hate that aspect that, sometimes we just look at survivors and we feel like their lives is, they'll figure it out.
If you go through rape, one of the things that you need to sort is medical interventions. You have to look for somewhere to go for counseling, but also you have to pursue access to justice. And from each and every level, there is a cost implication to it.
Not everyone
Thanks everyone for joining us and watching the film. We're going to cut it off here, but you can watch it in its entirety on YouTube, and we'll post the link in the chat in a second. As Laura said earlier, the documentary has been screened in communities in Kenya to gather audience reactions and understand its impact, with the goal to explore how the film could raise awareness, change social perceptions, and amplify the voices of survivors. Wangu's team has conducted those screenings with different groups of viewers, including survivors, community health volunteers, and stakeholders. And after each of the screenings, they collected feedback from the audience through surveys and open discussions. And then Laura, Heather, and I analyzed the feedback with thematic content analysis to identify common themes and insights that the audience brought up in relation to watching the film. Anila, would you mind sharing the slide I sent over earlier? Awesome. Thank you. I can see a box over the first half. I'm not sure if others can too. Could we get rid of that? Better? Nice, awesome, yeah. So this is a graphic from a paper we wrote summarizing the key themes that emerged in the audience feedback. And as you can see, audience members reported, first of all, a deeper understanding of sexual violence and its impact due to watching the film, including on men and children, which were reported to be underrepresented groups in discussions. Then many viewers highlighted learning about the barriers survivors face in reporting crimes and accessing justice, including societal stigma and inadequate responses from law enforcement. It was also discussed that the film has shown that storytelling can be powerful in encouraging reporting and healing, and that the documentary was considered inspiring for other survivors in terms of coming forward, as well as that sharing personal stories in this format is therapeutic. Then lastly, viewers also recognized the role of community organizations like the Wango Kanya Foundation in supporting survivors and advocating for their rights, as well as the importance of community support more generally in their healing process. So I think both films we heard about today, The Wound is Where the Light Enters and Unbroken Voices, are really powerful examples of how participatory filmmaking can raise awareness and amplify the voices of survivors, as well as drive change with regards to societal perceptions. Yeah, so we would love to hear your thoughts and reactions to either the film, the analysis, or more generally on how you think documentary filmmaking could be used to support survivors, picking up on what Eunice and Peter shared before the break. So yeah, opening the floor to any questions or reflections on the film or impact-oriented filmmaking more generally. I also I do have a practical question for Eunice and her team, if they're still here. I've had the chance to watch the Light is Where the Wound Enters before during a screening in London. I really loved it, and I know it has been really well received and recognized. So I think our team is really interested to learn from you in terms of how you disseminated it and promoted it, if that makes sense. Then I was also wondering whether winning these awards and having the documentary celebrated affected the experience of those who participated in it, as well as local community reactions more generally. So yeah, this question is for Eunice, but also Peter and others from their team if they're still here.
Hello, thank you very much, Christine. I'm not sure I picked you well. I think you were speaking about The Wound is Where the Light Enters, the premiere in London, and its impact.
Yes, we were wondering about how to disseminate our film and just get it into, get it recognized. And you've done a brilliant job with it. So I was just wondering if you have any advice for our team on how to do that.
Yes, well, thank you very much. First, because I might not have a lot of time on this, we found a home for our documentary in two places or in two spaces. One, we have a number of team members coming from the Global North, from your ends there. And then the children and I are actually here in Uganda. And so we decided that we would use our different spaces, existing spaces that are newly created by children born in Uganda, to be able to spread out, and do the screenings. But also, we were quite choosy while doing that. We, based on what the children wanted, the impact they wanted with traditional leaders, for example, with religious leaders, where we could get the highest impact with MPs, for example. And so we got a ride on the back of FAPAD that already had existing structures, existing contacts all over northern Uganda and outside northern Uganda as well, in Kampala. And we've been working with them to use their spaces to be able to screen. In the Global North, we have Grace International, which is led by Professor Sabina Lee of the University of Birmingham. She was also part of the project that I helped run here last year, Right for Time. And she's also, together with colleagues that side, decided that they would do it as an impact project, giving back to the world, to the research communities by, participants by using the spaces that they have. So they have it's something similar to what SAPAD is doing. They have an outfit that they're using to do that. We've had opportunities in the UN. We've had opportunities with the State Department, Women Building Peace initiative. When they involve some of us, we've used those spaces to do the screening and to call for the desired changes that have been echoed all over the place by children born of war themselves. So I guess it really depends on the context in which you're really working and how relevant your piece is to that context. For example, we are not doing it in Western Uganda because we do not have, in some parts of Western Uganda, we don't have children born of war that side. When the benefit then is actually in Kampala through their leaders who make national laws. That's when people from the West actually get to learn about the screening and to attend that. Otherwise, we are concentrating where in communities that we've already spoken about, where children born of war are located and they live the experience there every day. I don't know, I've been all over the place, but we can share experiences outside this meeting probably later on, share contacts, and then we can see how to progress. Thank you.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. Thanks. It was really helpful and great to be able to draw on your experiences.
That's great. Thank you very much, Kirsten, and a warm thank you to Eunice and Sajida on their presentations earlier. We have a few minutes before we hand over to Dr. Noura Parr. Are there any more questions? Okay. If anyone thinks of anything later, by all means, drop it in the chat. So now we will hear from Dr. Noura Parr as we discuss our research and exploration from our projects that took place in Palestine and Gaza. Noura, over to you.
I believe Nora's muted. Nora, I'm so sorry. You've just given great talk, but I believe you're muted.
It was genius what you missed. Profound. One day I'll get it right. First, again, so thank you everyone for being here. I'm really pleased to this is an introduction to our 3 research projects and partners in Palestine. We've sort of gathered their work together because it speaks so powerfully to each other around the themes for time and narrative and sort of not just creating voice and things that need to be heard, but finding kind of solutions, be they around genre or mental health approaches. You will have seen quite a few emails landing in your network inboxes around October 7th and after October 7th, when our partners in both the West Bank and Gaza became subject to a new atrocity. So we were consistently concerned for the safety of our partners, in particular in Gaza, and I know the Palestine Trauma Center will be joining us very shortly. And so you were all updated very frequently, and we became eventually sort of overwhelmed with news and updates, and sought to focus our energies on sort of the background architecture of supporting our partners and trying to continue to amplify the research and the work that they've been doing. We've managed to get some translations out of some of the projects' work from Maya Abu Hayat and the Palestine Writers Workshop, which you can see on our website. We'll get updates from them shortly. And we managed to host in London, but a few weeks ago, a book launch for the Tamar Institute and Ahlan Basharat's work on the condition of house arrest of children in East Jerusalem. And so I suppose what I want to say, and then Dr. El-Tawil from Palestine Trauma Center will explain a little bit more on what we've been able to do with them since October 7th, what it is possible to do, what it has been impossible to do, and just a general sort of update on the staff and what's happening, and where, what can happen to research in this moment. I think working with our partners in Palestine has forced us as a network to ask really difficult questions about the role of research amid atrocity. And we often come back to, well, the underlying issues that have let us witness this atrocity are the same ones that we were working on before the atrocity began. So it really redoubled our sense of urgency around the work, not only of our Palestine partners, but of all of our partners, and amplifying voices so that the underlying issues, right, those things beyond the frame of time in its existing manifestations can be addressed and can be heard, so that maybe if we're lucky, things like this can be avoided down the line. We will hear today from the Palestine Writing Workshop, the Tamar Institute, and Ahlan Basharat, and the Palestine Trauma Center, who have in very different ways worked to narrate and make hearable Palestinian harms beyond the kind of past, present, future sort of linearity. We've got a genre-defying texts, and of course, all of these were, mental health manuals, and all of these were started well before October 7th. The specific projects were conceived more than a year ago, right? Everyone applied for these follow-on projects almost, this time last year, am I right, Heather? We were accepting projects. So they were developed quite a long time ago. But I think that as we'll hear very shortly, they speak very powerfully to the underlying context and the underlying issues that are still facing Palestinians today. So without much further ado, I would like to give a little bit of my time to our partners if they're already here.
Hello, everyone. We're very happy to participate in this event today. I would like to share my screen.
You can go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So today I'm gonna tell you more about our project within the Right for Time network, the project that Tamar Institute for Community Education implemented starting from, as Nora mentioned, from last year. And the title of the project was Where Did Home Go? But just to give you a little context and a background about Tamar Institute, Tamar Institute for Community Education is an educational, non-governmental, non-profit organization which was established in 1989 in Palestine. And the establishment was a natural and like a necessity response to the circumstances that was taking place in the Palestinian community at that time, and the urgent need for Palestinian community during the first Intifada, the first uprising that took place at that time. The most important of these needs was to acquire means to help people and to help young adults and children to find ways of learning and to produce knowledge. We focus on principally on rights to education, to freedom of expression, and to access to information. And I will start by giving you or like walking with you through our journey in thinking and implementing the project of where did the home go? So as a threshold or like a starting point in which we started thinking, designing this project, we aimed first at creating safe and creative learning spaces for the children and young adults in the city of Jerusalem, especially those who are living under house arrest and in Jerusalem, where they can bond together and receive creative writing workshops that speaks to this need. House arrest, for those of you who doesn't necessarily know what that term is, it's a measurement used by the colonial entity in the occupied land of Palestine and more heavily in Jerusalem. And the purpose of this measurement is to control the space and time in which Palestinians live. Tamar Institute work with children and young adults, including those facing these harsh measurements of collective and individual punishment. These arrests last between 6 months and sometimes they are extended for longer times, and they are targeting children and young adults in the city. Many of them are forced to drop schools and to stop playing and seeing their family members and friends unless they are present within the meters spaces inside their homes. The movement is measured by devices attached to the kids and the children's legs or to their bodies And the internalized fear of the parents and children makes it even harder for them to disobey these kind of limitations. Palestinian youth hidden stories, especially those living inside the capital city of Jerusalem, who are under a great risk now more than ever of losing not only their homes and lands, but also their individual identity, as well as their collective identity, due to the constant violations and imprisonment they are experiencing by the Israeli occupation. Some numbers to give you more insight about the situation. We know that between the years 2015 and the years 2022, the Israeli occupation forces have detained more than 9,000 Palestinian children. In this picture that you see here, we see our dear colleague and friend Ahlam Sharat, who was one of the main team members in implementing this project. That was her first day of implementing visits and workshops to the children and young adults in Jerusalem. And in that day, you can see that she wasn't only, first of all, she had to obtain something that is called a permit to visit Jerusalem because she lives in Ramallah. And she had to cross a heavy military checkpoint that's called Qalandia checkpoint that separates the both cities of Jerusalem and Ramallah. And also she had to jump off one of the barriers in the way between the two cities. If we want to talk more about the methodology that we followed in implementing this project, thinking of and planning the project was a challenging yet a very rewarding process. With the help of our colleague Youssef, who is Tamir's coordinator in Jerusalem, we managed to reach out to tens of families of children and young adults in Jerusalem. First of all, we asked for permission from these families and had conversations with them to explain the project and to give them a sense of safety, that their children participating in this project is for the sake of their healing and overcoming the hardships that they went through, whether through the actual arrest, the investigations, and the court sessions that they had to attend, that were all part of the colonial regime measurements, as I said before, in the city of Jerusalem. And of course, as a result of a very long reach out process, we managed to work with 7 youngsters from the areas of Wad al-Juz, Sheikh Jarrah, Nabi Samuel, and Al Khalili neighborhood, who agreed to join us within this project and to be part of the writing and expression art workshops conducted by the author Ahlam Sharat. Sharat and Youssef, they visited houses and schools, and they worked with participants who were under house arrest or who have been previously house arrested in Jerusalem. And that was, as we said before, in the year 2023. The only place available for these sessions was actually the houses of these children and young adults, since the children and young adults were not allowed to leave their houses. Sharad conducted multiple visits to each one of these participants, and she managed to bond with the families and to create a sense of trust between the families, with the parents and with the children as well. The workshops focused on enabling them and encouraging them to express their ideas and feelings through creative writing and to improve their learning and expressive self-expression skills, and work with them to reflect on it through talking and writing from all perspectives while validating their stories through a safe, creative environment. We look at, because one of the words that we usually use when we talk about projects is outputs or like results. But here we prefer more to look at it as a learning process or learning processes actually, because different people go through different learning processes. For us in Tamer and also for Ahlam, the results of this intervention was not certain kind of points, but it was more an open-ended process in which the children and young adults who went through these sessions were provided with tools and platforms to appreciate and voice their experiences. This opportunity to be heard is valuable, especially in the context in which these children and young adults are constantly being silenced, especially in the city of Jerusalem. They have to live through most of their lives in the city like this city. One tangible output that resulted from this process was the book that you see the cover of the book now on the screen. It's titled From the Beneath the Hunter's Rifle. Tamer Institute produced recently this book, and it will be printed and disseminated this year. The bilingual book, which is in Arabic and English, it combines pieces of testimonies of all participants in the project, and sometimes even their parents as well. Sharat succeeded in contextualizing each story and providing a poet yet informative insight into the multi-layered colonial practices affecting concepts of time, space, and home in the lives of the participants and also their families. We are also happy that the book was launched in an event in the UK with the participation of Ahlam and received a very nice initial welcoming to the world and to the readers. I want to show you a little bit of the book and to read a very short paragraph. Let me try to reshare again. So what you see in the screen now is more like a design that we reproduced by the book, and it takes more like the form of postcards that we managed to produce as a result of the design, the main design of the book. So you can see in these postcards some of the visual components of the book. Mainly the visual components of the book were resulted by creative visual trainings that Sharat was able to conduct with the children. So these artworks that you see here are part of the participants' work. And also, of course, they shared with us lots of stories and texts. One of the texts that might be interesting also to share, of course, you're all welcome to read the book whenever it's released, but here I would share with you a very short paragraph. It reads, 9 months of these two children's lives went to waste. For 4 of these months, their house became a prison. It is the same house in which the occupation authority imposed strict building laws, like all the houses in the village. So the roof of the house was like the rest of the house's roofs, made of asbestos, except for the old ones that had a real roof, which is an easy to get rid of as a puzzle piece when the soldiers come with a demolition order. Another kid talked about his father in a very loving way. He says, my father's name is M. We decided to use the first letter of the names to protect the kids and the children and their family members. He's called Abu Mahmoud, and he is 45 years old. My father is tall and thin, with black hair and brown eyes. He works as a bulldozer driver. My father treats people kindly. He's calm and generous, and he loves to raise cats. His favorite food is maklube. My father does not like noise. He loves chocolate, and he has a Mazda car. In the external yard behind the house, my father grew damask roses and mint and lemon, clementine, verbena, olive, apricot, pear, and fig trees, and also raised ducks and geese in the yard. When we came out of the prison gate, our friends were waiting for us, as well as my uncles and their children and wives. My grandfather was happy for our release from prison, even if it meant moving to house arrest. He danced with my uncle and my other uncle, carried me in joy on his shoulders. Going back to the presentation. I'll talk now briefly about the hardships and the hopes that we also encountered during the implementation of the project. As a team from our positionalities, we managed to understand the complications of approaching the communities and families of house-arrested children and young adults, meaning that we provided the time and the patience needed to accept refusals, to accept delays, and to constantly converse and talk to families. For many children, writing was a very hard thing to do. They wanted to escape the topic rather than addressing it. Revisiting our tools with participants was a necessity throughout the project. Therefore, we thought of new ways to facilitate their sharing methods, such as telling story rather than writing it, accepting that sometimes they would throw away what they wrote when they feel insecure. Sometimes the parents or the school teachers might feel skeptical about our workshops, knowing that the special condition in the city of Jerusalem and the possibilities that any kind of public information might be used against the children and young adults in the future. Producing the book itself raised many questions concerning the best ways to protect children and young adults. We learned that providing the highest safety measures by covering their names and faces, even if it takes away parts of the reading experiences, but it was a necessity. In the future, we think that such rich and valuable experiences need to be joined also by a research effort in documenting and archiving all the wonderful and revealing conversations that we had throughout the project, and to keep it as a historical document for the next generation and for those who want to better think similar kind of interventions. We are hopeful that one day our children will not go through this type of arrest, be it house arrest or actual arrest. We are hopeful to save for a safe and free future for all Palestinian children and also for children everywhere in the world. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you very much, Iman. Do we have any questions for Iman before we move on to a short break?
I have questions, but I don't want to hog the floor if there are other questions as well.
Why not start us off, Nora? Go ahead.
All right. Iman, thank you so much for being with us today. It has been such an honor to sort of watch this project come out and to hold the sort of draft book in my hands as Ahlam came to London. And I was so struck. I mean, I think most when you have it kind of tangibly, but the PDF also kind of gets it across just how much Ahlam, the writer, had to work to make some of those, like the lessons, the learning, the problems kind of visible within the text. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit about how the book From Beneath the Hunter's Rifle differs from some of the other books that Tamer publishes, and maybe a little bit about sort of like genre, and how you decided to kind of capture that whole process in a sort of tangible object, if that's not too abstract.
No, I think these are very, very interesting questions. And of course, we had to internally, as a group, as a team with Ahlam, we had to think about them all the time. The genre and also the way we voiced the children's stories. For me, the most interesting part was also to voice those who refused to speak, actually, and not to include their voices, even if they didn't want their own stories to be shared, to find ways to include their stories. If you're all like, if you all prefer to go to a break, I could think about these two questions more and get back to you after the break.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Iman.
Perhaps, Anela, after we do all the Palestine presentations, we can have a kind of group Q&A so that I think a lot of the questions for one project will be very powerful if addressed by several.
Will do. Thank you. Okay, so we are going to take a short break and we group at 2:40. So we'll be back here at 2:40, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. We are now going to be joined by Dr. Mohammed Al-Tawil and his team from the Palestine Trauma Center as they explore their research findings from their project Learning from Gaza. Mohammed, if you're here, over to you.
One minute, but I'm coming.
طب وين انتوا؟
Yes.
انزل طريقة انا هي اصلا شارع.
Okay. I'm here. Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity. And we're going to present some things about the focusing project. And thank you for Right for Time and for the University of Birmingham. And thanks for Hadar and for Nora for all their support. Shall I share the presentation?
Go ahead.
Okay. So it's research and experience in focusing on BTC UK. So this opportunity, so we are going to talk about it and how we this focusing as a research and as experience for the people in Gaza. As a background, as you know from the news, this area as Gaza and West Bank and the whole Palestine, all these, Palestinians live in a context of complex and ongoing harm. Since 1948, we call it Nakba. And if you can see all these words, till now, the genocide war, it's no rest for the community, no time, no opportunity, no space to rebuild. It's all the time on harm, ongoing harm, and destroying not just the building, and disturbing and harming their mental health capacity for the people, children, adults, everyone. So imagine, so we're working in this context. And due to that, since I came to the UK here for at the University of Hertfordshire, so we set up Palestine Trauma Center in Gaza and in the UK. The one in the UK is helping and supporting and do supervision to the team in Gaza. This is the main project we are doing. Therapeutic project like family therapy, play therapy, CBT. Psychosocial support, SANIT, which is sort of psychosocial support. We call it SANIT in Arabic, means support. Focusing, which we are talking about today, which is adopted and supported, thankfully, by the University of Birmingham and Right for Time. And Days of Joy, which is entertaining and supporting the children out in the streets. So we try with this one to change the meaning of the street rather than to be rebels, sadness, trauma. We try to make some joy and help them to tell the story in a different way, in a resilient way. The other part of Palestine Trauma Center, which is emergency. For if you imagine with this context, so we have to deal with some physical relief and psychological relief, like psychological first aid. So now we're going to talk more about focusing. So this is for focusing. Okay. So the Gaza focusing was developed and tested among Arab speakers by Palestine Trauma Center in the UK since 2009 till now. And the story of this big story, so just make it short. Someone came from the United States and another friend come from Ireland. They visit me at the University of Hertfordshire and they said, Muhammad, we know you already built up and set up with your colleagues in Gaza, Palestine Trauma Center. How we can help you? I said, okay, if you can give us fund money to do more project, that will be great. They said, no, we could have experience for focusing in Afghanistan and Salvador was very good to help the community. So we could help you and your team to learn this. And yes, we try and we did the testing and developing for Arabic speakers at the university here. And then we send it to the people in Gaza, we train them. And then Birmingham University and Right for Time come on the board and we set out this study. So what's make it successful and why? So we need to know, and then we could publish this more. But focusing, it's, if maybe you are more familiar with Carl Rogers, it's more about like he's developed approach for helping people based on client center. So this is very gentle one. So Gene Gendlin, he was based in Chicago University. He developed this and what we call it focusing. So focusing is not just for individual. It can work for individuals and the group, children and adults in different setting and very gentle approach. So that's why but the one we are talking about today is they has two arms, this focusing. One is based on a client center and the other one is based on therapist center. So that's maybe in the future we could do the other part. But the first arm, which is mainly we are developed in Gaza and we have manual, it's focusing based on client center. So it was this, this in therapy, it's this way of method we are using. So now focusing has proved very effective. So we did some research and published internationally. So we found focusing is really more effective, more than family therapy and other psychosocial support approach, which we call it SANID. So focusing helped people in Gaza to get to know their feeling. Some people said, oh, this is, yeah, even now they can use it in a small scale because of the genocide war at the moment, but it's very gentle approach. It's different for a psychotherapist and psychologist. We are saying now during the war, we do group help and support, but focusing also, we found it because it's very gentle approach, helping people to tell and to know their feeling more, and they are in charge. So the therapist, don't have any agenda to approach and to push the clients. No, if they want to say anything, they are very gentle approach. They are very welcoming. So that's the way of moving forward from emotional and traumatic blocks and triggers. So focusing doesn't change the traumatic events, as you know, Palestine in the whole, especially in Gaza. So when we don't have magic stick to change. Hopefully we could the traumatic events around them, but we could help people to change the way they could respond to these traumatic events and tragic situation before and now. But now they need it even more. Focusing can promote wellness and strength in the community. So this is, we do in Palestine Trauma Center, we do a research to check the quality and the effectiveness of the approaches. So this is already part of the publication published here in English. And so we found this is a quantitative, but also in the qualitative, we found more obvious. The focusing was very effective and very powerful, and it needed for different groups. It doesn't need to have any background. Even people, they can learn the skills to use it and to share it. So with Right for Time, we studied perceived effectiveness. So we try to see through the qualitative and the quantitative, but we did more quantitative, but also with help from Right for Time, we did some qualitative analysis of interviews for staff and the client. Then we saw and we found its effectiveness, and to understand the harm as happening and in the community. So that's the individual, when they learn the focusing, they can see themselves as an agent for repair, so they can have some skills to empower not just themselves and the people around them. Focusing is provide culturally appropriate tools to build in the community. So we're not sending anything to the people in Gaza, because there are sometimes, people in Palestine, they are sensitive if this is how they send one. Is it Western and approach? No, we develop this from A to Z through them. So they already participate in the circle and the process of development of focusing. So we hope to build on this work and prepare for a randomized control trial to publish it more, and to publish also to complete the manual in Arabic and in English. So PTC had been working on focusing manual, as I mentioned, and Right for Time funding helping us to complete this with also randomized control trial. So that's will make it more possible widely to publish this in Arab world, and maybe other people, they could use it if they want. Since the 7th of October, the center has been badly damaged and destroyed by one of the bombed, and stuff scattered, but they're still working. We have one team in Gaza and northern Gaza, one in the middle zone, one in the south, but they are working in the shelter, school shelter. As you know, there's no safe place. We admire what they are doing, really, because they put their soul in their hands. They try to help themselves and to help people. So we don't force anyone of the team, but they love to do this. So now you can see how is the stuff they are working. Even not all of them, some of them injured, some of them evacuated. We have two, one in Egypt, one in Istanbul. So Niveen, luckily, she is now moved to Istanbul because she has a Turkish nationality. You can see now her house, how was, and after the war, and now it's been demolished and destroyed. Now another one, Jabir, and this is his house and family, and now this is in the beginning of the war, but now if we have another picture, it's been like a sand. All this building also destroyed completely. And this is also the daughter of Dr. Said. She was crying in Jabalia, sorry, Bet Lahia, northern Gaza, because she felt very insecure after she left, and she lost her books and toys and things in the rubbles. And she asked her dad, why this happened? And Dr. Yahya also, completely, he lives near Al-Shifa Hospital, his house demolished, and completely, not just his house, all the area around Al-Shifa Hospital were completely destroyed. Fida, he lost his wife, killed, and his daughter, she used to be with him. Now his daughter and his wife killed, and you can see this is his flat. They destroy, and this is badly injured. They send him and transfer him to Egypt, and he's still in recovery. He was badly really injured. And now Firas, he's from the team of Days of Joy. He lives in Al-Shati refugee camp. Completely all that area demolished. As just for your information, about 70 to 75 of the buildings in Gaza demolished and destroyed. For example, I've got 80 brothers and 4 sisters. All of their houses been demolished and destroyed now, and they live in a tent. This is my family also. It's about 100, but this is other people and guests. But from my family till now, it's about more than 50 killed. Some of them still under the rubble. We don't know what's happened to them. It's in Al Nusayrat refugee camp. This is Iman. She was with David Harrod. She was doing some work. She's great and helping us a lot. Since 2015, her parent house was demolished, and David went to visit because everyone want to tell the story, and she told David her story and take some picture in front of the rubbles of her house. And this is Mahmoud also. He was badly injured and he lost 19 members of his family. 19 members. So that's the genocide killing in Gaza. So what does mental health support look like now? It's some of our programs also, still continue. Days of Joy is still running and helping individual and families in the shelters, as I mentioned, but limited focusing. They're still doing some focusing, but in a small scale, because now the people, according to Abraham Maslow pyramid, people now focus on food, drink, and the basic needs. So mental health and other things, it's not in the essential needs for them now. But yeah, they need it. But now they need food first because they can't think about other things before the food and drink and shelter. So hotline is still there, available to some people. But what the team doing about, in addition to Days of Joy, they're distributing food and water and blanket and so on. And also now we added some collecting testimony. So the team, starting with the team, they wrote their stories and some feeling and thought where they moved and how it happens and what things, how things for them. And they send it here, of course, without their names, but they could be asked if they want to publish this. And yeah. So, and that's hopefully one day Gaza will be free. And this is thank you so much for our all partners and donors, including Birmingham University, University of Birmingham, Right for Time for their really great help. And that's it. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Mohammed, for sharing.
Hopefully, I'm not taking a long time. I didn't look at the time.
No, you went perfectly to time. We're going to hold the questions until the last presentation. And
Sorry, can we give? I didn't see David. Can we give a couple of minutes to David to say some things about his part of it? But I haven't seen him. I thought he's not with us. David, he's the chair of Palestine Trauma Center here in the UK. If we can, I don't know, Noura, is it okay to give David 2 minutes?
Sure. So I'm going to hand the floor to David Harold, who's the chair of the board of the Palestine Trauma Center here in the UK and has been working closely with us and Mohammed around the research projects that we've been doing and looking towards what we can continue to do to help and amplify the voices coming out of Gaza.
Thank you very much, Nora, and thank you, Mohammed, for the presentation. I think that told everybody what they needed to know. We've got to remember when we're planning that we've actually got to plan for several scenarios. We don't know when the war is going to end, and we don't know what the conditions are going to be in terms of the governance of the area, who will be in charge, how many different organizations will be in the district where we normally operate. There are a whole load of unknowns. On top of that, there is the unknown of the unimaginable trauma that not only the ordinary population have been through, but our own therapists have been through. And our first task is really to ensure their well-being, the therapist's well-being, before we even really think much about the extra work we do for the others. So that's really the extent of my contribution, a quick thought about how careful and how imaginative we've got to be about planning for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Okay, so we'll hold questions until the last presentation. And now I will hand over to Maya Abu Al Hayat from the Palestine Writing Workshop. who will present on Burning Time. Maya, over to you. I think we have lost Maya. Do we have any other of the team members from the Palestine Writing Workshop? Oh, I guess we can open the floor to questions.
So I'll maybe start with a question for Mohammed and David. But Iman, if you feel that this resonates with the work that you've been doing, please do feel free to jump in as well. So I presented yesterday on the sort of the findings of our qualitative research, which predated this latest atrocity by quite some time, and some of the findings around just how PTC understands in its like architecture of operation where harm is happening, right, at the level of community, and how it is empowering individuals to navigate, negotiate, and sort of repair some of those harms by their own kind of devices. And we've spoken also about how that community that you work with and that your tools work through has been changed sort of immeasurably. And I wonder if we can hear from you a little more of what that will mean in terms of reaching out, in terms of accessing the community that needs help most, where to begin, and or just sort of how it changes the shape of your work.
Mohammed, do you want to go first or shall I? You better unmute.
David, maybe you, because we give you more space.
Okay, a little quick note. When you say community, the first thing that you think of is a physical space. And that physical space is forever changing. I'm in touch with a group which is called Architects for Gaza, because I've been thinking about this in terms of long-term planning and short-term planning. Short-term planning is all about tents and maybe, mobile units, things like that.
And
Long-term
school
planning.
shelter, David. School shelter.
Say that again.
School shelter.
Yes, school shelters. And long-term planning has to do with what to we rebuild and where. I don't think we're going to get to long-term planning quite yet. And probably instead of having one center, which is what we used to have, we will probably have several units dotted about. That is what I suspect, Mohammed. Maybe you can say a bit more about that. But in terms of community, let me mention one thing. You have to actually rebuild something which used to be very, very solid, which was the hamula, the family, the extended family, because that was the great strengthening source of therapy, which came from the community. Now, since so many families have been shattered, how are you going to physically design the space so that you recreate a sense of family? And somebody mentioned that architecturally, and if you're talking about tents or anything else, you should think of the square space with the sort of community open air square space in the middle, so that families or groups of people look in on each other and get to know each other that way. I think we should be involved in that kind of planning. I could say much more, but Mohammed, is there anything else before I go on?
I just want to strengthen what David mentioned. It's if we need to rebuild the people in first, we need to start with the staff members to make sure they are safe, because there's no safe place at the moment in Gaza. And the staff need to be reassured and to help them as much we can, as we're doing at the moment. But in terms of like working in this based on like between 70 and 75 of the building in Gaza destroyed completely now. So the only things they could work at the moment easily with some risk, because as I said, there's no safe place everywhere, even the school shelters. Yesterday and the day before and last week, they're targeting everything's alive, even animals, not just a human. So, but at least there's some school shelters and some tent. Whereas the refugee now, the displaced people, they are staying. The team, they can working in two areas here. In the school shelters with our and the tents, they try to help. But later on, if the war was once the war finished, we could do systemic helping and navigating for the community. So we start with the staff and then family and their community. Because, you know, as we see now, the people, they could go covered and strength from their families. Even some families, they've been wiped and killed, most of them. But at least there will be the extended family. They stand for helping and filling this gap and give and support these people. So we need, in terms of focusing, we need to think, okay, now we have, at the moment, while there's still everything's falling down around the team and the people and the community, we help as much we can at the moment. But after the war, when this finished, we need to think like we could strengthen the same umbrella, under the same umbrella, is we call it like a holistic approach. So the people, the staff, and among the client, which is the family and their community. So we try to strengthen them. So we did some of these work before. So we need to strengthen this more, because as David mentioned, this is, we see this very obvious now, and the people, they they need it. Yeah.
You've got to remember that the support that we give, I can put it simply as being there for them, reassuring them that we are not going away. Now, I think that that outside support that you people here can give in any form, whether it's on Facebook or whether it's going on the marches, at the moment, that is absolutely vital. They know it's happening if you're going on a march. And any pressure on MPs that you can talk about, any pressure on any political representatives or groups, what they are interested in is the work we are doing to try to get this nightmare to end. And they need to know that we are there and not going away. Very, very important.
That's great. Thank you very much, David. Thank you very much, Mohammed. We have a few more minutes for any remaining questions.
I just want to ask Iman, is it this project Tamer from Tamer Institute, is it just East Jerusalem or cover West Bank, and maybe in the future, do you think, because I heard about this in Gaza, there's a Tamer Institute. So is it all these areas, or even in the Palestinian 48 area? Is it just the geographical cover? Is it just, if you can mention and say some things about that?
Thank you, Muhammad, and thank you very much for sharing. I find it very painful to hear or to talk about Gaza, so thank you very much for sharing the insight that you shared with us. Regarding your question, I think for this particular project, we aimed mainly to work with youngsters, young children, and young adults in the city of Jerusalem, because we focused on the home or house arrest. That is more like, as I said, like it's a measurement that is more like heavily used in Jerusalem by the Israeli occupation entity. While in other areas, you know, they use different types of tools to to manage the time and space of people and children. And here, maybe, I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of unchilding that was coined by Dr. Shalhoub, who talks about how the Israeli colonial entity is using unchilding Palestinian children as a strategy to take away not only their prospects or future possibilities of being healthy bodies, but also any possibility for them to see a future or to live their life. And they've been targeted as targets, as dangerous bodies. So we focus mainly in Jerusalem, and we work with 7 children. And it is actually an effort that needs to be, this kind of path that we went through with the children, it needs to be focused. So I think that was part of the, let's say that the success, or I hope it was a success that we made in their lives. But in other places, in other geographies, Tamer works of course, in more than 70 community libraries in the West Bank, including Gaza. We have a huge team in Gaza, and we're very proud of them because nowadays they're working with children and with young adults in Gaza. They're doing writing workshops, they're doing psychosocial kind of interventions with different types of tools such as expressive art and different types of interventions. And I think maybe some of our team members in Gaza. They're very active. And I think for them, work now, as you said, actually in your
They're
presentation,
still working now,
they don't
Iman?
stop.
During the war, they're still working?
Yeah. I think for them, working is an essential way of overcoming the daily worrisome, like and not to think about their concerns and their pain. The only way to do it is to keep working, even whenever it is like day and night, Eid vacation, whatever the situation is. I think they're even more active now. They read more, which is very interesting. People are reading more in Gaza. We're receiving lots of writing contributions from our staff members and from young adults and children in Gaza. And I think that reading and writing has become as well part of their healing process, if there is any kind of healing for such a genocide or for such atrocities that are taking place in Gaza. But yeah, we work in different geographies. In the 48, we cooperate with organizations, Palestinian organizations in Nazareth and different cities. Sometimes we also communicate with Palestinians outside of Palestine, with centers in Lebanon and other countries. And I don't know if I have time to go through Nora's question very quick about the book. And because the interesting part is that when it's a very long process, it's full of details, but then at the end, when you want to talk about it, sometimes we miss out some of these details about how we did the thinking, how we thought about what to do with all these testimonies. And I think that was Ahlam's main question. And we went through these questions with her about what is this book? So, okay, we have stories from these kids, from their families, parents, but also we have the writer's self involved in this book, involved in this work. So we had this kind of question about the writer's self versus the participants' voices. So we also wanted to manage, or like to find a way so that, especially with Ahlam's writing style, which is a very specific style, she's always known for this, for her style of engaging the reader. She wants the reader to be part of the concerns, the pains, the questions that she's going through when she writes, and she wants this to be very transparent. So that's part of Ahlam's style, and she also used that kind of style, which I think was very necessary for the book, to take our hand and to show us how she did this, how she even thought about writing itself. And that was part of the introduction of the book. She's asking herself, what is writing? What is writing when you write about children arrests or about Gaza? And of course, she worked with children last year, but then she had to go through the writing process during the war, which was very painful for both of us, I guess, for Ahlam and for us. I think that we had questions about the readers as well. We were thinking about who's reading the book. Are we writing the book for the local reader who might know the context of children in Jerusalem, or are we writing for the reader in the world? If we're writing for the other whoever the other is, maybe we need to add more context for all the stories, so it changes somehow the content of the book, of course. We thought about translation, all the complexities of the translation process. We thought about revealing or not revealing the names and the details of the areas and the spaces that these children come from. So as your question about the time that we needed to produce this book, I don't know if we can calculate it with numbers, because again, numbers is a very superficial and limited way of measuring and speaking of the experiences, as much as it is like these moments in which we were sitting together, thinking and rethinking what we're doing, and actually finding meanings, trying to find some meaning, and trying to be just for the stories, and trying to be aware that we are representing these stories. Of course, it's an actual, let's say, testimony and biography of, not biography, but testimonies of these children, but we are representing them. So there is the responsibility of why we select this story, not that story, why we select this detail of that child's experience, not the other detail. We had to go through all these kind of ethical questions. So I guess the ethical component of producing the book was very heavy on us, but it was also very important, and we believe that we needed to give it the time that it needs. And just a very small note on what David's mentioned about how the efforts that are taking place outside of Gaza, the collective political movement that is taking place, and the way it is affecting the psychology of people in Gaza. I truly believe that this is very true, and I see how children and young adults in Gaza, they're aware of the political movements that are taking place, especially in the universities around the world. I've seen them holding papers saying that they know, for instance, about the movement taking place in this university or that university, and that they support it, and they feel that it's good. So I believe that this kind of these kind of movements, they are actually also affecting the psychology of children and people in Gaza. That's part of how they're being. I think that's part of the strength that they're trying to obtain in these circumstances. So yeah.
Thank you, Iman. I will open the floor again for any final questions. No, well, it's a shame we couldn't have Maya here to speak about her work on Burning Time, but if you are interested, it is available. A translation of one of the works that they produced is available on the website. Thank you, Mohammed, David, and Iman for joining us today, and for all of the work that you've done and continue to do. It is powerful, important, and we hope to be able to support it and continue to support it. I think the message, we are still here, when we think about time, is also very important. And so thinking of ways that we can continue to support and amplify the work that you are doing. We are always interested to continue the conversation. So I will close our session on Palestine and the work that Rights for Time is trying to amplify from our partners in Palestine. And we will, maybe Anela, you can give everyone a brief of what's happening tomorrow and how to continue the conversation.
Sure. Thank you, Nora. Thank you all for being with us today. If you can join us at tomorrow's session and join our partners as we discuss how to break in order to make systems of protection. So join us all back here at 12:30. Looking forward to seeing you all.